Hello, welcome to this episode. I've, I think I made peace, but more importantly, I think I've realized. Are they the same thing? I think realization really leads to peace. But I've realized that this podcast helps me take stock of what's going on in my brain, in my mind. Are they two similar things? Are they the same thing? I don't know. Is one a physical organ and one a physical construct? Or is it just a manifestation of a larger construct which has been individualized for each person or each sentient being? I don't know any of these things. The problem is you get into the space. But anyway, let me just finish this thought. See, that's what happens with the mind. It helps me voice stuff that's going on, internalizing it, but then it helps me externalize it. And I think the biggest progress I've made over the past 2 years is, as I told you a couple of weeks back, maybe last week, I'm not sure, that if all of us were held accountable for our thoughts, then we would really just sort of be stalemate, right? Everyone would be screwed. Unless, of course, we reach a state of Zen where we're also calm and have such a vast amount of inner peace that we have absolute control. That's, of course, never going to happen. Let's be realistic. 8 billion people who've got control over their emotions and thoughts. Highly doubt it. I think we can confidently say that day is not very. It's not very far away. Not very. It is very far away. But I realized that this thing of information, and in this era of everyone having access to so much, gives people the opportunity, of course, to master knowledge and to have everything that they want to know at their fingertips. But it also gives people an opportunity to know just enough, so they don't have to be ignorant, yet they don't have to also dig deeper. And I think the problem is, I'm one of those people. I like to know, but I don't like to research it. So I like to find out about it through conversations with people who know more than me. But also, you can pretend to know more in a conversation with someone who knows less than you. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Because you can read a book and say, since today's conversation is with I love the word, with the renunciate, with Dada Gunamuktananda from the Ananda Marga. And I think he's based in Spain right now. And today's conversation is about going down the path of spirituality, spiritual seeking, a life of meditation, consciousness, and various other interesting things that go with spiritual realization. I thought I just want to know more. I mean, and I'm in this place where I think this, if you ask me, are you a person who sticks to something? I would say typically no, but this is something that's really interested me over the past couple of years. I know it's a short time to make such a statement within, but I really do it not with a mission in mind, right? Because a lot of times we're taught that we have to have a goal. We have to have this idea that within 5 years, you need to master this, you need to be the boss of it, you need to kick it in the balls. But the beautiful thing I found is with something like this, which is even discovering that whether you're ready or maybe you are not ready, or whether you are interested, it's just such a big first step, and it doesn't have to have a fixed approach. Something that works for someone else might not work for you, and vice versa. But it just is such a powerful thing that you don't realize until you sort of look back and say, wait, what has happened, right? Because there's so many different things, and the destination sort of tends to be the same. It's finding your, if you want peace, inner balance, whatever you want to call it, or you want to find God, if that's something, or your self-realization, or enlightenment. Many people call it that. So the thing is, I think, you should, I think if you've come this far, you should continue to the end of the conversation with Dada Gunamuktananda, because he talks about this destiny that we are taught by religion, which is got all these negative consequences as a result of action in this life, which is not good, which ends up sending you to hell or heaven, depending on what you do, or whichever religion you sort of cater to has its notions of good and bad. But the spiritual aspect of things doesn't have a negative system. It's a sort of it's a system of rewarding within this action of life, right? What you do is what you kind of feel immediately, and the destiny for human beings, I think, is not conditional on your behavior, but it's this journey of towards self-realization, which is a great destiny for everyone. So it's really interesting how he puts it, and through his experience, his meditation, his learning, he's shares a lot of stuff that gives perspective to someone who's on this path, and it also makes sense and it gives hope. If you are in this world of turmoil where you see the worst of humanity, and you see, fortunately, a few people bringing out the best of humanity, and I really enjoy talking to him. I don't always come across, especially in this space with gurus or with spiritual leaders, or where it tends to sort of, then the ego comes in the way, and it ends up becoming more about their organization. I think as a one-to-one, I think Dada and I had some questions about the nature of humanity and the nature of the experience that we're living through at this point in time, and he took me through it in a really, I think, kind and in a way that I can understand. And I hope that translates to right now to what happened. I just had a bit of a brain fart. I hope that translates to you right now who's listening, and I hope it helps. But let me come back to my introduction. I'm doing the introduction. I'm doing it differently now, eh? Yeah. But if someone tells you, by the way, to drink water out of copper bottles, think twice. Because a lot of these things are coming up where you have to return to the old ways. But I suppose everything has good and bad, and we've progressed in some ways for the better, and we've come up with some things that are better for us to use. The reason why is I had a miserable day yesterday, because some genius put lime juice for me to drink after my session on the range, as I do as a professional golfer. I'm not a professional golfer, but drank this entire 1 liter of cold water with lime juice and salt, and I was so buggered, dude. I was done for. Later, reading it up, found out that the best way to clean copper bottles is through lime juice and salt. Yeah, so like a genius. I mean, of course, I didn't make the drink, but I drank the drink, and I should have stopped drinking the drink after the first sip, and I felt something's off. I was like, this doesn't taste right. But I was like, no, but you're dehydrated. That's probably why you're feeling ill. And I drank the whole 1 liter. Felt as sick as a, I don't know what feels more sick than I did, but maybe, I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't have an analogy, but I felt extremely sick. Is that a sign of my comedic brain not being exercised enough? I mean, maybe it is, but I felt sick as a vomit bag on a bad day. No, horrible. But I felt really sick. I mean, this is clearly, I drank the rinsed out. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you can empathize with my sickness and maybe resonate a little bit with it. A little puke from your end wouldn't be discouraged, or would be appreciated as a sign of solidarity with your host of the SoapyRao show. Like, but yeah, it's not a good feeling. It wasn't from that end either. And yeah, it's a strange thing when you're feeling that ill, is sometimes when you're feeling really good and you're feeling confident and you've just exercised, you don't really think about life. You think about just going to the next step, or getting about your day, like, oh cool, I feel good, I'm going to take on the world, especially with that accent. But if you're feeling down, that's when you actually think about your life, and you all the thoughts which are not which are not good come to you. And if at that point you can make peace, you're able to I wouldn't say master your emotions, but accept your emotions, swallow your emotions, feel your emotions. And that's one thing I'm trying to do. Feel everything, whether it's good or bad, or happy or sad, or anger or frustration. Don't kind of try to only hop onto the good emotions, but try feeling it all. It's not easy, man. It's not easy. But I think it's a good, it's an interesting place, I think, for all of us dealing with this information era with information access, with information wars, with misinformation, with stuff being dealt out to you to control your or manipulate your way and your the way you receive things and process it. So I feel you need to have, or I need to have, a sense of, because it's a great opportunity for faffers in the world. I think especially the kinds, in our groups who used to always fucking talk shit. They really didn't have to fact check earlier. Like they could just say, "Oh, my dad went to the moon," and everybody was like, "Wow, the moon!" And they could show a piece of rock and say, "This is from the moon." And if you're dumb enough, you'd fucking believe them. But now it's the next. It's an advance in the ability to faff, because if you have certain access, you can faff more than others. So I don't know, where do you get your information which is reliable from? Do you try to seek it from people who are experts? Because even they in some way are faffers, right? They're so narrow-minded that they're faffing. Wouldn't say, yeah. But I think talking to people gives you a sense. I mean, because it's a little bit more time-consuming. It's a little harder because you have to make the effort to find them and to also make sure that they are really sort of in experienced enough in that space to give you information that you might not know, more importantly, might not have access to, but also to give you information that may be authentic. Because I think it's amazing that we have so many books out there, that we have so many blogs, that maybe not blogs, but we have so many different sources of information. But I don't know, for me, I like it in the form of this spoken, being disseminated by a human voice. So I like listening to podcasts. I also like doing this because it helps me understand the world around me through these people who are on my show. And also when I listen to other shows, I get a sense, I don't know, it works both ways. When someone's compelling and they really sort of believe in what they say, and they've really sort of experienced the things that they're sharing with you, and the stories they've lived, or the incidents that they are recollecting, or the anecdotes that they're narrating, I feel in many of those stories or those experiences, there are messages which I don't know if writing can't do justice to it. I'm just doing double negatives and double positives, sorry. But there's something for me that is really special with a story being told by a human voice. And whether it's formally, whether it's in a form of a book, like an audiobook or whatever it may be. But more importantly, when it's heartfelt and it's something that they really lived through, you can tell, and I can tell, as opposed to a spiel that's been prepared by a branding PR team that sort of is just regurgitated and used across various media outlets or various promotional platforms that these people use. And you can tell after a point. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, kids. But I like this source, and I hope you do as well. And having said that, let's go into today's conversation with Dada Gunamuktananda, all the way from España. And he's actually originally from Australia. But as he says, his geographical journey is nowhere close to the spiritual journey that he's been on. And I'll let him tell you all about that. And Dada, if you listen to this, thank you so much for doing this episode. And for all of you listening, I really appreciate you tuning in, if that's what the word is, and you coming back week in, week out for the SoapyRao show. I appreciate it. Do share it with anyone you think will benefit from this conversation. And till next time, goodbye, God bless, take care of yourselves. Cheers, catch you on the other side. Dada Gunamuktananda, welcome to the SoapyRao show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
It's honestly fantastic to speak to someone who's been through such a transformative journey, because you've started somewhere else, entirely different, and you're here today. So maybe, I think, geographically, where has your journey brought you from, and where has it taken you as we speak today?
Well, geographically, it's taken me pretty much all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
in the
Fantastic.
last 30 years or so that I've been practicing spirituality and meditation.
Hmm.
Uh, and but more importantly,
Hmm.
the geography is not really that important. More importantly, it's taken me uh, deeper within myself and given me a greater understanding of life and the world and myself.
That's such a very interesting place that a lot of people tend to ignore because it's something I was thinking about today, and I think a lot of people have experienced this thought process, especially because of the space we were in as early as 6 months back, with being locked up in at home or
Mm.
being stuck in a certain place which might have not been home, but we experience this sense of, oh, I can't go on holiday, or I can't get out of this place, and then it either leads to frustration with your circumstance, or you kind of sort of start blaming someone. But a few people, and I think you've really highlighted that before even the lockdown, is this idea of looking within. So could you possibly just sort of talk about how this started for you? Because this idea of traveling in many cases becomes a distraction to get away from what you recognize as work, or your routine, or your identification with a certain place and a certain task or a certain memory. But for you, a person who's been so, how do you put it? I think in depth into their own journey within, does what does this experience feel going around the world, going across different places on this planet so far, but at the same time having this accompany this journey accompany you on this physical external journey? So I don't know if it's a question, but I just want to understand this experience you went through and how it began, and what you kind of felt as the profoundness of this journey grew with time.
Mm. Well, I when I was younger, I started in my 20s. I was questioning a lot of things, and I dropped out of university, and then I felt very liberated when I did that, because I was in a kind of a it was a university is a very intellectual process that you have to go through, and I didn't particularly want to go through that process. I didn't want to go down that road. So when I dropped out, I felt liberated in a way. I remember throwing my notes away in a dust in a one of those there just happened to be one of those big bins on the road that people throw all their furniture and stuff into. And I
Right.
threw my notes into that with great glee.
I think we all dreamt of that. We just didn't do it because of either of the loans our parents took or we took.
Yeah, well, at that point, I was paying $150 per annum per year for university, so there was no real.
That's that's nice to hear. Yeah, it's
It
not-
wasn't like I had any loans for university or anything like that.
Mhm.
So, and then I started seeking for a deeper way of life. I became a spiritual seeker. So I was doing a lot of contemplation and introspection, and reading a lot about different types of spirituality and meditation and things like that.
Mhm.
So I and then I had been reading a lot of books, and then which had talked about the concept of the guru.
Mhm.
The concept of the guru is, in the deepest sense, is the concept of the cosmic consciousness or God teaching you through a particular physical form.
Mhm.
So I developed a desire for my own guru.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go into, I was living in a kind of a semi-rural area which was just outside of a city, and I used to go into the city every week, once a week. So the next day I went into the city, and everywhere I looked there were these posters. Of course, this was the days before the internet, and people pasted posters on walls and lampposts and things like that around town. And everywhere I looked I saw this poster that said learn meditation. It had a name like mine on it, and the lecture was going to be that evening at the library,
Yeah.
the civic library. So everywhere I looked, I saw these posters. So I thought, oh, well, this must be a something significant.
Yeah.
So I went to it, and it was very significant. It changed my life,
Yeah.
and I found what I was looking for the rest of my life. So, I had been to India once before, and I had traveled and not only been to India, but been to many different places. But it turned out what I was really looking for, I found where I started off from. So that highlights that what you really want, you don't really have to look for in other places. It's not a question of place. It's not a question of geography. It's a question of looking within yourself ultimately. Of course, people have different desires and different things that they're looking for, and the more objective those desires and things that they're looking for, the more they relate to particular places or schools or universities or whatever you're looking for. But if you're looking for the deepest sense of meaning and identity, then ultimately it doesn't matter where you are. You only have to look within yourself.
It's such a powerful thing to look within, yet it's such a difficult experience sometimes to get started, right? We get overwhelmed because we hear stories, especially if you start on this journey of looking within or seeking the spiritual answers. Sometimes you're recommended books by certain people, especially now with the internet. You're recommended YouTube videos, or to go to certain ashrams or to certain schools or follow certain teachers or certain lectures. There's so many resources out there, especially today with the internet. So, someone might say, why don't you start with looking at the breath work and how that affects your mind and helps you calm down. But then the moment you type in breath work on, say, YouTube or Spotify, you're bombarded with like 10,000 different kinds of breathing practices, different schools of thought. And then likewise in all aspects of spirituality, if you kind of search spirituality online, it's pretty hard to look within. So,
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. So, how does that, like for you, when you began this, you said you found these posters which directed you in some way, was a sign for you to follow this particular instinct to go to this meeting. But what was it like when you started on this journey of seeking spiritual answers or the journey of spirituality? Like, what was your frame of mind?
Well, first of all, let me just address what you said about the internet and everything.
Yeah.
Life was relatively simple in those days. Because this whole online thing has crept up on us, so we don't really realize how much, or we don't remember how much simpler it was in those days than it is today.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it now,
Yeah.
I realize it was a lot simpler.
Yeah.
And
we wouldn't have been able to do this, but I think it was a lot.
Yeah. Well, there are advantages of both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Both eras that nowadays, of course, we can communicate a lot more directly and freely and everything like that. But at the same time, we have this problem of information overload.
Yeah.
Information overload is a very big problem in today's society, and it's causing people a lot of psychic stress.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, anyway, then it was a lot. It was a lot simpler, and in some ways, a lot easier to do anything because you didn't have so many choices, and sometimes it's easier if you don't have so many choices. Of course, choices give you a lot of more options and a lot more leeway in a lot more opportunity to research things. And but but then but then you have the problem of, like, for example, you said, okay, you search for a certain thing and you get 10,000 answers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for example, if you search spirituality online,
Mm-hmm.
in the vast majority of cases of the search results you get, you're not going to get spirituality.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
You're getting someone's view of, or what they say, what they assert is spirituality. You're not necessarily getting spirituality.
Yeah.
Of course, it depends on what you mean by spirituality, but
Yeah.
but really, you're not getting spirituality on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Hardly anywhere.
Right.
Very, very, very few places that you will get leads to true spiritual practice on the internet.
Okay. That's
So, although we have a lot of choices and a lot of search results, it can be misleading, and it can be a diversion rather than taking you where you want to go.
mm-hmm.
There, the more objective the thing that you're looking for, the more likely you're going to be able to find. For example, if you Google how to do this on your computer, or how to find this or on the internet or whatever, you're going to get a very direct and relatively accurate result.
Instructions. Yeah.
Instructions.
Yeah.
If you Google instructions, you can find practically any instructions on the internet, and that's very useful for objective things. But for a very subjective practice, like spiritual practice, like meditation, you're not necessarily going to get what you really, or I should say, what is real spiritual practice. You're going to get a lot of faff that people have come up with in their own imaginations and fantasies, and thought that they can, people that think they're realized or elevated or enlightened, and think that they have something to offer, but they don't really have much to offer at all, apart from their own opinions and their own imaginations and their own fantastical ideas of their own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
What if you really want true spirituality? You're going to have to want it deep inside yourself first, and then by that very deep and personal and intimate desire that you build up within yourself for a connection with the Supreme, for a connection with the cosmic, for a connection with for a mystical connection with the causal entity of this universe, by the cosmic grace you will get it only. There is a saying, when the disciple is ready, the guru appears. As I said before, the guru is not just any person. Many people call themselves gurus. Doesn't mean to say that they are the guru. The guru is the cosmic entity, the supreme consciousness, the cosmic consciousness of this universe, expressing itself through a self-realized master.
And is that usually a person, or can it be, does it have to be a sentient, does it have to be another human being, basically?
Well, it can, of course, you can get the teachings of the Guru through different media. For example, once I had a terrible headache. This was many, many years ago, and it was very hot. I was in Singapore. I had a terrible headache, and I didn't know what to. I didn't know how I could get rid of this headache because it was really very bad. And then I saw this book on the floor, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and I had this idea. Okay, I'll pick it up and I'll turn to the first page and read the first thing I see. So I picked it up, I turned to the first page that I turned to the middle of the book, and I read the first thing that I saw. It said, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encompasses your understanding." So through different experiences like that, you can get insights into what you're going through. It means that somehow the universe is teaching you. Somehow the universe is guiding you.
You know what's amazing about that is that there are so many conflicting, yet, as I said, just kind of from the previous point of so many options, right? Where you kind of get caught up in the practice of seeking spirituality than actually the meaning of what you're looking for. But with what you just said, it's that if you are ready to receive, then you don't have to limit yourself to a school of thought or a philosophy or uh, a form of yoga or whatever you think is the means really is insignificant, because if it needs to find you and when you're ready to receive, there will be something that will help you on your way, right?
Yes, because ultimately it's your inner self that is going to be teaching you, that is going to be guiding you. Your inner self being the inner self of the entire universe and every being within the universe, God within you and within everyone else, God pervading the entire universe, the universal consciousness pervading the entire universe and every mind of every being within it. So ultimately it's your inner self that you're looking for and that will guide you towards itself. But at the same time, you need it's very useful, if not necessary, to have a structured practice which has been given by a realized soul. So we say in yoga that the teachings of the Guru, the teachings of a realized soul that has guided you directly, are very helpful and very important on the path. It's like someone has the desire to be a very good cook and to cook delicious food, but they have no idea how to do it. They could experiment and they could try to learn by themselves in the kitchen, but it would be better if they had a very good recipe book where they could learn the process. So it's like that, but on the subjective level. Of course, our inner selves are guiding us back to ourselves. But at the same time, we have so many distractions, and the mind is naturally very the mind can either be used for good, or more often than not it distracts one from good. So
Right.
you have to learn how to use the mind for your own good and for the good of others.
Yeah, because the mind seems to latch on to certain ideas. So even if you have the good intention of going down a certain practice, which you know is going to help you still the mind, but then the mind kind of seems to take on these points and say, no, let's focus on this instead. And then again, even in something as, you know, self-fulfilling and something as beautiful as a journey of spirituality, even in that the mind can find ego and find things to distract you and make you feel insignificant or play on your lack of self-worth. So it's quite it's quite interesting that we have such a powerful tool at our within us. At the same time, we have the same tool which works against us. And do you feel, with your experience, that sometimes the whole point of it gets lost because we kind of get caught up in the nitty-gritty? And does the spiritual experience for someone, is it all the same, or is there a unique thing out there for each of us, for our inner selves to discover?
Well, ultimately the experience is the same.
Okay.
All rivers lead to the same sea.
Mm-hmm.
But one's individual journey is always different, because we have different issues, or we can say karma, to work through.
Okay.
So the way in which the journey manifests for each person is different, but ultimately the journey is the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same journey and the same goal. Everybody has a different mind and a different personality according to their history. And it's the history not only of this one life, but of many, many lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So our journey over many, many, many different lifetimes has brought us to this time and place where we have a particular personality and a particular mind, and everybody has a different personality and a different mind. So although the path is the same, the experience will be different for each and every person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting back to what we were talking about with the mind, I would just want to elaborate on this a little bit too.
Yeah.
That we have to use our minds constructively and strategically in order to utilize our time and our lives properly, and to do the right practices that will benefit us. But at the same time, it's the mind that we're trying to transcend. It's the ego which is our biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
The ego meaning the assertion of the mind on your being. The usual state of affairs is that someone is controlled by their mind, not that they have control over their mind.
Yeah.
So normally, someone is under the control of their mind. They're pulled in different directions according to their emotions and according to what their mind. They cannot control. Normally, we cannot control our thoughts and we cannot control our emotions.
Yeah.
But yoga, and particularly meditation, is the process of gaining control over the mind, gaining control over the emotions, so that we can use the mind the way we want to use it, not the other way around, that the mind uses us the way it wants to use us.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we have to gain control over the mind and use the mind. It's like a knife, for example. A knife can be used for killing somebody, but it can also be used for chopping vegetables and making a delicious vegetarian meal.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to gain control over the knife and use it in the right way. And this is very important. And then ultimately we have to use it. We have to use the mind to not destroy itself, but to transcend itself.
So recognize it for what it's good at doing, yet go beyond it, because it's
right.
not entirely what we are, right?
Exactly. What we ultimately want, our true self, is beyond the mind. It's deeper than the mind. The mind is like a temporary collection of thoughts and emotions. It's like a thought. I sometimes describe the mind as a thought cloud surrounding our being. Our being is in the middle, and there is a thought cloud around it.
Could you even go as far as to say that the mind is just another sense that we perceive the world through?
It's it's the culmination of all our senses.
Okay.
It's and more, of course, but it is connected to the senses, of course, because the senses feed into the mind, and the mind works partly because of the input of the senses.
So it's
So
another layer between us and the world. It's kind of these things work together
yes,
to give. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
it's a layer between us and the world. That's true, and we usually use it to relate to the world and other people. And of course, this is only natural because it's the way that the world works. It's the way that nature works. That every being has an interface between itself and the world, and that interface is its mind. And in undeveloped beings, that interface is very simple, and so its life is very simple. But in human beings, of course, the more evolved we get, the more complex that interface becomes. And now you see, in the last 30, 40, 50 years, human beings on this planet, we have evolved very rapidly, and you can see how that is reflected in, well, it's either a result of or it's reflected in the fact that we have so much technology at our disposal. You know, when I was growing up, I remember we had the radio, and the radio had the on-off button, and then it had the volume, and then it had the channels, and then we had the when I was a child, we had a black and white TV, and it had the on-off, and when you turn it on, then it started like you hear this noise. It was warming up and everything, and and then you had the volume, and then you had the channels.
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was so life was very. It reflected the simplicity, relative simplicity of life at that time.
I thought
and
there
the
was a
relative
person inside
simplicity
that
of
box.
mind. Yeah, right. We used to joke that there was a little man inside the box.
Yeah, because I was like, how could this happen? Like, it's such a big box. There should be someone in there.
Right. Yeah.
It's quite
So-
fascinating. Even I grew up in the 80s. Like for me, that was my sort of time frame when I was exposed to video games in their present state at that time, television, and it was, I mean, choice was not even there. But I want to sort of use this as a, you mentioned this idea of the past 30, 40, 50 years, and also you mentioned the idea of other beings, simpler life forms, or any form of life besides humans. I mean, we almost assume in an arrogant sense that we are the only ones who are embarking on this journey of evolution, yet at the same time, we also think that we are the ones privileged enough to experience the spiritual journey. But it's all life forms that are part of this. So is it some sort of, besides just our journey, or let's talk about this planet that we live on, the experience that all life forms on this planet have sort of shared over the past million years, it almost feels like we've added, while evolving and getting more advanced as a civilization, especially human beings as a civilization or as a species. Do you feel that at some point the ability to transcend these layers and connect with the inner self, or the true self, or the consciousness was easier versus today, when we've added more layers, complicated the interface more? Because if you look back, I mean, I don't claim in any way to be an expert on any of these topics, but I've been doing a little bit of reading. But when you look back, maybe 1,000 years back, or 2,000, 3,000 years back, there seems to be more people than not living this in this way, or in this kind of I wouldn't say in this practice, but having a life which was more attuned to using the senses for what they are, but also understanding the larger context of why we live.
I understand what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, life was a lot simpler, and that afforded an advantage to
Mm-hmm.
people. But in another way, there were a lot of disadvantages as well, because life was more brutal. There was less justice in the world. There was less opportunity. People had less leisure time. They were generally overworked and had very little energy and time and inclination after working to do spiritual practice. Or if one
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do deep spiritual practice, one had to become a renunciate or go and live in a cave or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, life was simpler, and it afforded more time and more, um, well, not, well, potentially more time
Yeah.
to 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 introspect. But in another way, we have a lot more advantages today,
Yeah.
actually, because the human mind is a lot more developed,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a and despite having a lot more distractions today,
Mm.
we have a lot more capacity to deal with all the distractions as well.
Mm.
And also our spiritual practice, um, especially this a spiritual practice like the one I practice, the one I learnt from my guru, from the organization which I belong to, Ananda Marga, is a lot more developed and a lot more efficient in its use of uh, the mind and the time that is needed to practice it.
Okay.
So we, in a way, there's really no use in us um, lamenting the past, the loss of the loss of the simple past of and
Mm.
and uh, and lamenting the fact that we have so many more distractions today, because that's just the situation that we have
Yeah.
to live in, that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But I would say that although there are advantages to both situations, a very simple life and a very complicated life like the one we have now, I think on the whole we're probably a lot better off now,
Mm.
because despite the fact that there is still a lot of injustice and exploitation and obviously still war in the world,
Mm.
uh, conflicts, we do have a lot more justice and equality and opportunities than we did in the past.
Yeah.
We still have a long way to go. We have a bit of a way to go before we have a completely, well, you can never get a completely just and exploitation-free society, but
Yeah.
we're heading quite fast now in that direction. So I would say that we're better off now. This is a very good time to be living,
Yeah.
despite the fact that there are a lot of problems, particularly mental, psychic challenges that we have to overcome. I mentioned before this problem of information
Yeah.
overload. There are so many different types of um, uh, uh, anxiety and depression that people feel, and confusion and overwhelm, that there are so many things in life that they have to deal with. But despite all that, I think this is a very good time to be living, and if one can adopt the right lifestyle, one can utilize this time and place that we're in right now
Mm.
to a very good effect.
Yeah, I think I'd like for you to sort of take people through this understanding, because does everyone who want to seek this spiritual experience or the spiritual answers have to go down the path of joining an ashram, committing to a life of being a yogi? And while you're talking to me about that, could you also maybe address what it means to practice yoga? Because I think a lot of people think it's just going for a group yoga class, asana practice, standing on your head and thinking you're a yogi, but there's a lot more to it. So maybe could you take those 2 points and sort of address that for me, please?
Sure. So according to the philosophy, the yogic philosophy, every being in this universe, and not only on this planet, but of course there are many other planets with life and human life throughout the universe. We're only one of trillions and trillions of planets throughout the universe.
You said other planets with human life as well?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to talk about that later, but you can, I think that's very interesting to know.
Yeah. So, well, there must be. I mean, my guru referred to them, but if you just look at it rationally, then the fact that there are countless. It's not even enough to say trillions and trillions. We'd have to say countless planets throughout the universe, and many of those are habitable, and many of those, the chances are that, of course, there's life and also human life on many of them. But anyway, the philosophy says that every being in the universe, every one of the countless beings in the universe, is on a journey towards realizing itself as the universal being, as one with the cosmic being. So it's like, I always use this analogy because it's such a good analogy, but it's like we are all returning. The river returns to the sea and realizes itself as the sea. When the river flows into the sea, it becomes one with the sea. So, the philosophy says that we are all not only part of, but one with the cosmic consciousness.
Right.
Our own consciousness, our own sense of being, is actually one with the cosmic being. Like a wave is one with the sea. A wave is not only part of the sea, it's one with the sea. You cannot separate it from the sea. It has its own individual existence as a wave. You can define that existence, but if you go deeper into its existence, you will very soon realize that it's one with the sea.
Right.
So just as a wave has its own existence, we also have our own existence, our own consciousness, our own sense of being. But that individual sense of being, that individual consciousness, is one with the cosmic consciousness, with the universal being. So the journey of each and every being in this universe is like the journey of a river back to the sea.
Okay.
And as the river gets closer to the sea, it becomes wider and deeper and calmer, and eventually, when it reaches the sea, it becomes one with the sea. So the closer one gets to the realization of oneself as the cosmic self, the more one becomes like the cosmic self, the more one experiences one's own individual experience as the expanded, infinite experience of the cosmic self. And ultimately, one realizes oneself as the cosmic self, and that we call self-realization. So we're all on a journey to realizing ourselves as the cosmic self, to self-realization. And as human beings, we have we've come. You can see all the different creatures in the world. They have different levels of consciousness, of awareness. You can see that, for example, a a very a simple animal like an ant or something like that has a very, it's obvious that its sense of awareness is quite limited,
Yeah.
but it goes along its work and carries out its life according
Yeah.
to its limited sense of
It doesn't
consciousness.
compare itself to a human being saying, "Oh, I wish I."
No, it
Yeah.
doesn't have the same. But as human beings,
Yeah.
we've developed a much more expanded sense of awareness and consciousness.
Yeah.
So it means
Yeah. It's
that we're
yeah.
we're approaching the end of the journey as human
Right.
beings.
Right.
Now, the human animals are quite satisfied in their own little bubble.
Mm.
Each animal lives in its own little bubble, and it's relatively satisfied with the limited life that it leads
Yeah.
within its own boundaries. But as human beings, the human dilemma is that we're living in both worlds. We're between the animal and the divine. To
Mm.
be human means to be between the animal and the divine. So in some ways we're pulled towards our past animal lives and animal tendencies, and
Right.
in other ways we have this awakened sense of the divine where we're heading. The closer we get to the divine, the more we have this awakened sense of the divine within us, and often that causes a conflict between our animal tendencies. you know so
That's so evident, and it's so
yeah.
beautifully put because. I mean, sorry for interrupting you. I was just trying to process that information because, a lot of people are dismissive of the fact that we, as a soul, travel through various, I wouldn't say journeys, but the journey goes through different chapters, if you want to call it, and manifests in different life forms. So, you're saying that what we are today, you and I, as a human being, have gone through the various chapters in our past as various life forms. So we could, through our actions in this lifetime, go back closer to the animalistic tendencies and the traits in our next life, or based on our practice of what we decide and choose to do in this life, which we can call karma, determine what our next chapter is.
Exactly. Yes,
It's quite brilliant.
if we live this human life in a very animal-like way,
Mm.
then the mind will become more animalistic again.
Mm.
And one always gets the body which suits the mind. When a certain being dies, when its body dies, then its mind will be reborn in a body which is appropriate to the state of its mind. So
Okay.
if the state of the mind at the time of death is very animalistic, the tendencies of those animal tendencies have been indulged or cultivated in one's human life, then it's likely that that mind could. For example,
Yeah.
there is a big connection between dogs and human beings.
Mm.
Dogs are very intelligent, of course, and and very close to human beings. The minds are quite close. Or should I say, the dog mind is very close to the animalistic human mind. Now,
Okay.
if a human being indulges too much in animalistic tendencies, then it could regress back into a dog's body or another developed mammal, for example, or even
Okay.
further back.
So,
On
could
the
you,
other
just as
hand,
an example, sorry, just while people are listening to this, animalistic tendencies or traits, if you want to call them, could you describe a few? So, if someone's doing it right now, they're like, "Ooh, I can stop."
oh, oh, right, okay. Well, there are many, but the main four are eating. So, say for example, if one indulged too much in eating or developed too much of a desire for, overeating
Mm.
or indulging too much in food, that's
Mm.
one of them. Fear is another one. Sleep is another one, and sex is another one.
Okay.
Those are the main four.
Okay.
animal vrittis that are still present in human beings. Now, of course, it's natural that we express those vrittis because they're all related to survival.
Yeah.
So it's only natural that we express those vrittis, but we must be careful not to over-express them. Over-expression will lead to too much attachment to that particular vritti, to that particular tendency. And ultimately, at the time of death, if one still has that over-attachment to one or more of those, so you can imagine, for example, you can take any one of those four things, and you can imagine what life form you might be born into to express that vritti.
Yeah.
And that
Quite
wouldn't
interesting,
necessarily be a disappointing thing for that person, because that person wants to express that, so that they will get a body to express it. So, but on the other hand, so we have the instinctual vrittis, the instinctual tendencies, but on the other hand, as I said before, we have this spiritual drive, this spiritual attraction, which is taking us closer to the divine. Now, if we use those vrittis in order to maintain our existence, eating, sleeping, and all the different necessary tendencies to maintain our existence, but at the same time, we only use them in a very we can enjoy those things, but we don't get too attached to them. We don't overindulge in them. And at the same time, we're using our lives very constructively and very strategically to practice meditation and all the different practices of yoga that support the meditation practice, so that we can increase our attraction and our movement towards the divine. Now that's the ideal. So that's the situation that we're in as human beings on this planet at this point in time, that we have a very good environment for doing that. Despite all the problems in our world, those problems are providing us with the opportunities, the obstacles that are compelling us to move ahead, to move towards a greater and a higher life. So that brings us now to the practice of yoga that you asked me about. And I can talk about that now if you want me to.
Yes, that would be lovely.
So,
I just have a question before we get into that.
Sure.
You mentioned that how the body adapts, or we're assigned a body that is, for instance, say we really liked eating, so we're given a body in this life that is suitable to consuming large quantities of food. And let's take the human experience, right? Do you feel that someone can change that? Or, for instance, okay, I'm going to go ahead and use my example, just because it's something I'm familiar with, and it may be easier because even people listening have heard me talk about my so-called my disability or my condition. And I'll just give you a little bit of background right before we go, and I don't want to harp too much on it, but so I went to Bhutan a couple of years back, and I always seek, sometimes it's maybe a person, a healer, maybe sometimes it's a person who's popular in that part for certain powers that they might have. And so I went to this Rinpoche in outside a town in Bhutan, and I didn't ask specific questions about why I have a visual impairment or why I went had sight loss at such a young age. But my wife and I were sitting and talking to him, and we just asked, why is the situation what it is? And he said that the reason why it's manifested like this is because in your past life you've committed a lot of wouldn't say sin, but you caused a lot of pain through killing. And he further went to say that because you were a tiger, you have to repent that kind of killing, and this eye condition has been given to you in this life form for you to find a better way of living without causing hurt. So the reason I mentioned that, I want to also get your thoughts on it. I want to get a second opinion, if you don't mind.
Well,
Because this guy said I'm a tiger. So every time I go to the zoo, I'm like, was that my cousin? But I want to understand is when you're given a certain body or a certain path to follow in this life. Now, since everyone listening on this at this point to this podcast is a human, let's just stick to the human beings. Is there the power and the ability, and I think this might lead into the next part about what you talk about yoga. Do we have the power to change our path, if you want to call it destiny, or also the thing we've been given as a result of the past life?
Well, ultimately our destiny is self-realization. We have the most positive of destinies. We all have the same destiny.
Nice.
So that is, of course, is unchangeable, and the great thing about the yogic philosophy and Eastern spiritual practice is that we're working towards that. We recognize that one destiny, and it is the most positive and inspiring destiny that we could have. It's not like Occidental religion, which says, depending on what you do, you will either go to heaven forever or you will go to hell forever.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not very inspiring for a lot of people, because they come to the conclusion that they would go to hell forever.
Yeah, and then they waste a lot of money paying people to make them feel better about themselves.
Right, and they make the church very rich and things like that.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that our destiny is very bright, is the brightest destiny that is possible. But we have the ability to utilize our lives in a way which will bring us closer to that ultimate destiny, or take us further away from that ultimate destiny, or not affect our relationship to that destiny much, and we have to do the same. We may have to live many lives before we make any progress, either one way or the other. But the thing is that usually there cannot be, you cannot stand still.
Yeah.
So if you do not move positively towards in a positive direction, then the general rule is that you will go backwards in a negative. You cannot. It's like the bicycle. If you leave it on a hill, it will roll backwards unless you push it up the hill.
Right. So the tendency is, if you don't do anything, to regress.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So it's important to try to be proactive towards a positive way of life, and a positive expression of your life towards the ultimate destiny.
Okay.
So but the thing is to remember is everybody has the power and the ability to work towards to make their lives positive.
Yeah.
You may have, for example, a disability such as yours that may or may not have resulted in the way that the Rinpoche expressed to you. It's entirely plausible. I can't say one way or the other, but it's an entirely plausible explanation. Mm-hmm. But that's not the important thing, because the past is we all have a past, and I'm sure we were all tigers or other animals at one point in time. And animals.
Frankly speaking, I'm glad I was a tiger at least. Imagine.
Yeah. Well, you
cool.
were you were the one of the most noble animals in the world. So
yeah, I mean,
so that's great.
Yeah, if you'd said rat or something, I'd have been a little disappointed. I'm like,
not that there's anything wrong with rats either. I mean, they're also lovely creatures.
I'm sure, but yeah, the human in me prefers a tiger. At least okay. I have bragging rights.
Right, you have a good bragging right there. Yes. So the thing is that, despite our past, we have come to this place where we are today, and we may have certain disabilities or certain tendencies or certain bad habits that limit us in our lives currently, but it's entirely within our power to change that. Of course, it just depends on how we utilize our minds in our lives.
Yeah.
So anybody can say to themselves, "Okay, I have." Regardless of where I have come from and how I have evolved into what I am now, my past does not define me. What defines me is what I do with myself in the present, going on forward into the future. So anybody can say, okay, now I am, regardless of what I was doing in the past, now I am going to do this. I'm going to do this very constructive, very strategic, very scientific, very comprehensive spiritual practice, which will take me forward into and closer to my ultimate destiny, which is to realize myself as the ever blissful infinite consciousness of the universe. So, why not do that? That would be the great thing to do. So the way in which to do that is, now, I'm defining this as the lifestyle of yoga, but essentially these things that I'm going to talk about now are practices which are good for all people, regardless of religion or regardless of culture or regardless of racial background or cultural background or religious background or any other relative factor. These are universal things which are good for everybody. So first of all, health and cleanliness. Looking after the body. There's the saying that a healthy mind lives in a healthy body. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So keeping the body clean and healthy as much as possible. Of course, we all have our problems, but trying to do that so that the body acts as the temple. So the real temple is the body, because that's the temple that you are visiting each day with your practice, that you're using each day. You don't visit it. You're living in that temple.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is morality. Spiritual morality is very important. Now that doesn't mean that never to exert force. Say, for example, non-harm has been misinterpreted as non-use of force, Gandhiism, that we should never fight, we should just be very passive. No, not at all. Ahimsa, or non-harm, means that you always try to maintain the least harm to yourself and others around you. But that means that, for example, if somebody attacks you or attacks somebody else or does harm in some way to you or somebody else, then you try to counteract that negative force that is harming you or that is harming others. So that's non-harm. There's also benevolent truthfulness. Truthfulness does not always mean that you should tell the exact truth, because very often you would do more harm than good if you tell people the exact truth. So that's why it's called benevolent truthfulness. I think it was Buddha that said that there are three qualities that your words should have. First, they should be sweet sounding. Number three, they should be sweet sounding. Number two, they should be true. And number one, they should be helpful to others. So number one is helpful to others, not necessarily true. Of course, mostly they should be true. But the first priority is that they should help others. They should be benevolent. These are the principles of morality. Always trying to do the right thing. Of course, it's often difficult to do the right thing, and it can be especially when doing the right thing involves sacrificing your own well-being for the welfare of others. It can be a very difficult thing to do, but it's important to try to cultivate this practice of always trying to do the right thing for oneself and others at the same time in every given circumstance. And if there is a conflict between your own well-being and the well-being of the collective, of the well-being of others, of the society, then that should take precedence over your own well-being.
Right.
So to try now, hopefully we don't encounter such a direct conflict very often, but that's the concept. So the principle of morality, and it's said that morality is the foundation, is the base of spiritual practice. A house needs a proper foundation, a strong foundation. You need to build your practice on a strong foundation, and that foundation is the principles of morality. In yoga, they're called yama niyama.
Right.
You may have heard of them.
Yeah.
So that's the principle. That's morality. The second thing is, which is related to the principle of non-harm, is the type of food we eat. We should not eat animals. As a general rule, animals don't like it when you eat them.
Yeah.
Right?
I know, as a tiger, I felt it.
so
Consent was not there.
it's natural. Don't worry. As a tiger, you were quite right in doing that, because if you were in fact a tiger, and if you did in fact do that, you were quite right, because it's the nature of the tiger to eat other animals. That's how the tiger lives. A tiger does not sin by eating other animals, but for a human being, it's harmful. It's harmful for the animals, of course, that we're eating, and it's harmful for us because we know better. We should know better.
Okay.
Than not to eat other living beings. Of course, if we're Eskimos living in the Inuit people living in the North Pole, and all there is seals, then of course there's nothing wrong with that. But we're living in a society where we do not have to harm other sentient beings in order to survive.
But some would say, Dada, that even plants are sentient.
Well, it's a question of gradation. It's called the gradation scale.
Okay.
Now, the principle behind the gradation scale is eat those living beings that are less conscious rather than more conscious.
Okay.
Right? If you kill a cow, it will feel it more than if you kill a carrot.
Right.
Right?
But speaking of less conscious, I think the way we're going, eating other humans might be the simplest life form.
Right. Well, it depends on the level of consciousness of the human.
Exactly. Okay. No, so I get it. There are certain. Every being is conscious, but
in the future, eating meat will be looked on in the same way as we now look on people that used to eat other people. Cannibalism.
Right.
So we're evolving very fast. Where the evolution of humanity is accelerating very rapidly, and we're very rapidly moving into a world where to eat other living beings will be considered very soon. It will be considered barbaric. So people should come on board with this and really try to. They may like the taste of meat or whatever, but it's not a question of like. It's a question of doing the right thing.
Nice.
And that also has a very important effect on, of course, physical health. The cancer and heart disease and all these things are all linked to meat eating, but not only physical health but mental health as well. The state of the mind. For example, veganism has become a very big thing in the West these days, but they don't consider that there are certain foods also, there are certain vegetarian foods that they shouldn't eat because they affect the mind, like onion and garlic. Onion and garlic has long been known as a sattvic, a sentient, as a tamasic, static food in India, and that a sentient or a sattvic diet should not include onion and garlic.
Can you just talk about why?
This is also something that we need to consider, that it's not only a question of not eating meat, but for the sake of one's mental health, for the sake of one's mental well-being and one's state of mind, there are other foods also that we should avoid, such as onion and garlic. So basically, yogis have experimented over thousands of years, and they found that onion and garlic have a static effect on the mind. In other words, they dull the mind. It's like the opposite of clarity.
Okay, okay. So it
If
sort of
you can
sends your mind into a
imagine,
bit of a fog.
exactly,
Hmm.
it gives the mind a foggy feeling, which you won't necessarily notice if you're accustomed to eating them. But if you do an experiment and say, okay, I'll stop eating onion and garlic, and then you'll find that your mind becomes a lot more clear, and you will experience a lot more clarity of mind. And then if you do another little experiment and eat them again, then you will notice the difference very, very clearly.
Mm.
So it's good to avoid, for clarity of mind, it's good to avoid these things.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
So food is not only important for the animals, but also for the environment, and there's so many other factors, but ultimately for the physical health and the mental health.
Mm.
And then there is so these are all aspects of yoga which, as I said, are defined under the yogic lifestyle, but are universal things which are good for everybody. Of course,
Yeah.
we all know that, ethics and morality are good for everybody. Keeping oneself clean and healthy is good for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, Eating the right food is good for everybody. Helping others is another one. Service is another big aspect of yoga. It's one of the great pillars of the yogic practice, that the more you help others, the more you will in fact be helping not only the others but also yourself.
Because we all are heading towards the same destiny, and
That's right. And the
right.
more you help others, the more you feel that others are a part of you, and that the more connected you feel, the more good you feel about yourself, and the more. So you're not only, and the more that you're working through your karma,
Mm.
to work through your karma, to work through one's issues. If you feel, for example, if you feel depressed
Yeah.
about about life, go out and help someone. That's the best cure for depression. Of course, that's more easily said than done.
Yeah.
Someone with clinical depression will say, "Well, I cannot even get out of bed."
Yeah. Yeah.
But the concept is that the more you help others, the more connected you will feel to others and the rest of the world, and the less depressed you will feel about your own situation.
Mm.
And the more you will be working through your individual issues, your karma, so to speak. So this is
Yeah.
and of course, the more you will be helping others. So this is
Yeah.
a great pillar of the yogic practice. Another one is the yoga postures, that people have up till now equated with yoga, the word
Yeah.
yoga. In fact, the word yoga means union of one's individual self with the divine self, what I was talking about before, the process of self-realization. So yoga is all the different practices which help us in our process of self-realization. So yoga postures are in fact part of the yogic lifestyle. They also help us because they help to balance the emotions. When you do yoga postures,
Mm.
you're giving your glandular system, your different endocrine glands in the body, a kind of an internal massage. So depending on the say for example you do the shoulder stand,
Yeah.
you're compressing the thyroid glands
Yeah.
in your neck, and so you're kind of massaging those glands, and you're regulating the hormonal secretions from those glands, and the thyroid glands are actually responsible for the whole body metabolism. So if you do, for example, that yoga posture, you will be regulating the whole body metabolism, and you'll be regulating all the hormones that affect the mind. You'll be balancing the hormones that affect the mind.
Interesting.
So with a more balanced mind, with more balanced emotions, so you're not experiencing the negative emotions so much of anxiety and fear and depression and all these negative things, then you can use your mind better to go within, to look within
Right.
yourself.
So it's kind
It's
of
very
each designed and each suggested in the practice of yoga, which is across the body, the breath, and the mind, to complement each other and kind of enhance your path down this road, right?
That's right. So all these practices are optimizing the body and optimizing the mind towards attaining a more and more spiritual sense of being.
Right. So, Dada, on that note, I think I might have asked you this a few minutes back, but someone like you has taken the decision to go down and enhance your journey on this path towards spiritual enlightenment, if you'd like to call it, or self-realization. At the same time, it's a big commitment, and of course, it's a good commitment. It's a great commitment, but I'm not taking away from that. But someone, say, for example, sitting like me, just listening to this podcast, who has a job, who has responsibilities, who has a family commitment, or whatever they might have, how did they take the decision or take the step to do something like this? Because it seems, I wouldn't say a sacrifice, but it seems like a lot of overall life changes, right?
There's the story of the of a man, and he goes to visit a saint who lives in a cave, and all he does is he's just meditating. He has a very elevated soul, and the man goes to visit him, and he says, "Oh, I'm really impressed with you. You have sacrificed so much." And the saint says to him, "Well, on the contrary, it's you that are sacrificing. You're sacrificing the eternal for the ephemeral, but I am attaining the eternal."
Right.
So, but the point is that, in any case, now is not the time in our lives and in the history of human society that anybody should go and live in a cave and only do meditation, because there's a lot of work to do in the world. The point is that we can do everything that we need to do in our lives, regardless of how busy our lives are. We can do everything that we need to do much more efficiently if we are also practicing spiritual practice, and we can fit all the practices of that spiritual practice, of the yogic lifestyle, into our lives, regardless of what our lives are. So, of course, everybody has I'm a sannyasi, I'm a renunciate. I don't have my own individual family, so of course I have a bit more time than other people in that regard. But even the vast majority of people with family lives and jobs and things like that. Of course, I also do a lot of work. It's not like I don't have any work to do. So, we can all fit half an hour of meditation in the morning and half an hour of meditation in the evening into our lives. Because if you do half an hour of meditation in the morning and half an hour in the evening, that's 1 hour out of 24 hours.
Yeah.
For the most important work in your life, which is your own self-realization.
And it's funny how we do it sometimes.
Right. And the rest of the 23 hours you can use for all the other things you have to do. But it only requires 1 hour a day of meditation. And I didn't mention that, the yogic lifestyle is like a pyramid, and all the things that I talked about before are in that pyramid. And of course, the foundation is the morality at the bottom, but the top is the meditation at the apex. So we can all do that. And as I said also before, the meditation the mind as well as the meditation practice have become very advanced and very refined. The human mind has become a lot more refined over the past, thousands and thousands of years. And also the meditation practice, the spiritual practice itself, the techniques, the mantras, everything have become a lot more refined and efficient and advanced. So we can do a lot more in a lot less time nowadays than we used to be able to do in the past. And that's good, because we have less time now to do it in. So we can utilize whatever time we have in our lives. We can utilize it for the good, and we can fit everything into our lives. And the very practice of performing spiritual practice throughout one's life throughout one's day, by incorporating it into one's lifestyle, will make all the other things that we have to do much more efficient.
So it's almost like you don't have to stop meditating the moment you get off your yoga
Exactly.
mat or thing. You can continue the practice of meditation
If
through.
you do all the other things you have to do in your life with a meditative ideation, the ideation with what we call cosmic ideation,
Yeah.
then you will automatically do things more efficiently, and you will get in the cosmic. The more you get in the cosmic flow, the more things go your way.
Yeah.
The less you have to fight against the world.
Yeah.
Now
It's almost like it finds you, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So the more you meditate, automatically you're going to slip into that cosmic flow. And it's the path of least resistance. Most people, they have this inner feeling, either consciously or subconsciously, that they have to fight with the world every day, and that they have to really battle to get anywhere or to get anything done. But it doesn't need to be like that. You can get to a stage where even if you have the most daunting obstacles in your life, you can go under the radar. You can skirt around those obstacles very easily if you're in the cosmic flow. If you're in the flow, everything becomes easy. If you're out of the flow, then you'll always be fighting. So if you have a spiritual practice in your life, if you're practicing the right technique of meditation, and it's getting you're slipping more and more into that cosmic flow, then life will, even though you're spending more time than normal people with spiritual practice, for example, you're actually experiencing that you're having more time because you're in the flow.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because when I talk to some people, and I have fortunately developed the discipline to spend some time with some form of meditation, whether it's, maybe chanting the Gayatri Mantra, or whether it's some form of pranayama, or it's some form of chakra activation. I try to do it. And the days I go without doing it, sometimes because for various reasons, or if I go a day or two, I start feeling the imbalance. I start reacting more aggressively. I start being more mindless about the way I act, and also start feeling negativity build up. But when you talk to people sometimes, right, and you ask them about what they do for exercise, they're like, I do yoga, and which is fine. And I think everyone has a right to what they perceive as yoga and the practice of it. But then I'm like, I love doing that as well. And I sometimes start and I finish 3 hours later, because I talk to my yoga, the person who teaches me my asana practice, and then we discuss some ideas, what's going on in the world, and I ask him some questions and he asks me some questions. So I go at like 8:30, next thing is like 10:30 or 10 o'clock, and my friend's like, I need to get to work. How can you? I don't have the time that you have. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. It's not that I have an office job to go to, but I really enjoy this, and I make sure that I give it the time. And I'm not saying in any way that I have attained higher understanding. It's just that it's almost like we need to justify something which is so inherently important and is so amazingly good for the mind and the body and the breath. And we have to justify doing that because society has taught us that you must do as few things away from the job and away from these established ways of productivity.
We have to get away from this mindset that we have to justify that. We don't have to justify that at all.
Yeah.
We on the contrary, we should justify not doing it. We should have to justify not doing it. You would have find a good excuse why you didn't go have a deep discussion today, or why you didn't do your yoga postures, or why you didn't do your meditation, because you should do your meditation. You should do your yoga postures that support the meditation and all the other yogic practices that I talked about. And you should have deep discussions and think deeply about the meaning of life and things like that, and have discussions with whoever it is that also likes to have these discussions, and read inspiring things, books that not only talk about the objective aspects of life, but go into the meaning of life. Why not? Because that's what gives us that inner feeling of deeper satisfaction, and we should have that inner feeling of deeper satisfaction, because that's very important, and in today's society, it's not given very much value at all. I talked before about information overload. We have a lot of information, but we have very little real deep knowledge and wisdom in our lives. We have a lot of information in our lives, but we have very little wisdom in our lives. So the more wisdom we can get from talking with others and listening to the teachings of the great ones, the gurus of the past and the present, and reading spiritual books and things like that, the better it is. So rather than having to justify these things which take us away from the office or whatever, it should be the opposite. We should we should have to justify not doing them.
It's amazing that it's so easily easily quantifiable, right? That even something like meditation, someone can say, oh, you only meditate for 20 minutes. I do it for 45 minutes. And bringing in the aspect of intellect and the ego, if you'd like to call it.
That's the ego saying that the more is better, but more is not necessarily better.
You'd rather do even 2 minutes.
It's the quality. It's the quality that matters. Yes.
So someone struggling with this, because it's, as I said, I think a couple of times over our conversation, is that we get caught up with the physical limitations, or with the ego determining or intellectualizing things, and saying, oh, this person said this or that person said this, the noise basically which the ego sort of brings into this meditation practice or this spiritual journey. So what I think you mentioned this even in your talk about the consciousness, which is something that doesn't need to think, and the mind which has to be sort of transcended, if that's the word, or you could look past the mind to the silence beyond. And I know these are things that each person takes their own experience and their own situation and their own time to come to either meet or visit or to make peace with. But what are some things that, if someone is beginning or already on this path, maybe a couple of things they can be aware of which can encourage them to continue, as opposed to lose hope or lose, I wouldn't say focus, because I don't think this is something that needs focus. It needs more appreciation. So could you, before we wind up, maybe give a couple of things that have helped you, which might help people listening right now?
Okay, so the first thing is to learn and to start to practice an effective meditation technique, and you can do that, for example, by going to anandamarga.org, and on that website there is a Learn Meditation button, and you can get an introduction to the whole meditation process, and you can get an introductory technique there on that website. And then, depending on where you live, you can contact your nearest Ananda Marga meditation teacher, such as myself, and we can teach you your personal mantra and give you more to go on with. Okay. That's the first thing. So the first thing is to take the determination to have a deeper practice in your life, a spiritual practice in your life, and incorporate the yogic the yogic practices in your life, or as many of them as you can. Of course, we can't all incorporate everything into our lives, but as much of it as we can. So start practicing. Second thing is, keep in mind that especially when you start, the mind is not going to be able. You're not going to be able to control your mind immediately. So starting to practice does not mean that you will automatically have control over the mind. You won't necessarily be able to keep your mind on the meaning of the mantra, for example. The mind will wander. You may be sitting there for half an hour thinking of anything and everything except what you're supposed to be thinking of, which is the meaning of the mantra, the ever blissful infinite consciousness. But this is normal because we're not used to thinking about the ever blissful infinite consciousness. We're used to thinking about anything and everything but the ever blissful infinite consciousness.
Yeah.
So this is a process. So you keep in mind that we're all the same. It's human nature. That the mind wanders. We all have this crazy monkey mind that we have to somehow deal with.
You know,
And
I was thinking of, sorry for interrupting, but you said your mind just thinks about everything else. And the entire session, or the time I spent yesterday meditating, all I could think of was carrot cake. And I was like, man, I'm not even that big a fan of carrot cake, but I just can't get the thought of carrot cake out of my, and my mouth started watering.
Right. Well, there are worse things to think about than carrot cake.
That's true.
So you were doing pretty well there if you were only thinking of carrot cake.
No, then I was thinking of where to get it. Then I was like, look at me being so materialistic. Then I'm adding to the pollution. I'm adding to the plastic waste. I didn't stop at carrot cake, but kept coming back to carrot cake.
So the thing is that that's part of the process.
Right.
So don't worry about that. The important thing is to keep practicing.
Okay.
And another important thing is, as I said before, to always keep in mind that your destiny is ultimately you will ultimately attain what you ultimately want deep within yourself. Our destiny is to ultimately attain our inner selves.
Right.
And that destiny is the brightest destiny that one could possibly imagine. To feel, well, this feeling is beyond the mind, so you cannot really imagine it, but to try to put it in words, to feel eternally blissful, to feel eternally at peace with oneself, with nothing disturbing your state of being, that is your ultimate destiny. Now, to really experience what that means, of course, is to attain it, and until one attains it, one cannot know what it really means.
But it's good to know that this movie we call life has a happy ending. At least it has.
Well, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. I think a big part of the problem in today's world is that people don't know what the ending of the movie, what the movie is, what the purpose of the movie is.
Yeah.
They're thinking, well, okay, why am I living this? Why am I doing all these things? And they're even getting sick of the different enjoyments that they have because they don't see any point in them.
Yeah, because even the things you mentioned, the animalistic things like eating, sleeping, sex, and I forget the fourth one.
Fear. Well, fear is something, one of the instincts that...
The instincts.
Yeah.
So it's almost like because we've resigned to the fact that we don't know what's going on with this movie, we don't have no control over the ending, or the ending doesn't seem as promising because of various messaging or various things that we've been told or we've been brainwashed into believing, that we almost take these four things which are animalistic, and instead of enjoying them and actually maybe regressing, we're even fighting within that, saying, oh, don't eat too much, but you must not eat this, you must not eat that, you mustn't, we kind of are so caught up in that we're neither here, which is enjoying these animalistic tendencies, but neither are we on the other part. Like we kind of lost both the things that we have options in doing.
A big problem is that because there were a lot of dogmas in religions in the past, and people felt that they had to follow a certain religion even though it had all these dogmatic elements to it. Of course, all the religions have this essential truth at their core, but there's a lot of dogmas that surround it as well. So what's happened in the last 100 years or so is that there's been, especially in the West, there has been a big reaction to religion, and so people have gone the other way, and instead and we've been conditioned to think by society that there really isn't one higher purpose to life. There isn't a higher goal. There isn't a divine being. Life is arbitrary and purposeless, and ultimately our existence is going to end in nothing. So because of this conditioning, it we're feeling it more and more now. It's engendered a feeling of hopelessness and meaninglessness in people's minds, and this is one of the big problems of society. It causes depression and anxiety and all these other things, and lack of connection, a sense of lack of connection and hopelessness and meaninglessness. So if we can turn that around and say, well, look, we don't want to go back to the past in having to follow these dogmatic beliefs and believe in these dogmatic ideas like going to hell and things like that. Let's not do that. But at the same time, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that life is completely meaningless. Because ultimately, if one really takes the time to search within themselves, to introspect, one will realize that there is great meaning and significance in one's existence. And ultimately, the more one practices, you only have to start practicing meditation to very quickly realize deep within yourself that there is a higher sense of self within you and within all things, that this universe is not arbitrary, that each and everyone's consciousness is existing within a greater consciousness, a higher consciousness. The wave is part of the greater sea. So if we can engender and instill in people again that feeling of meaning and purpose and higher existence, then that will automatically solve a lot of problems in the world, and I believe that's happening. That's happening as we speak. We're very quickly we're in the middle of a shift in consciousness, which is going from the material consciousness of the past to the spiritual consciousness of the future. So that's happening as we speak. That's one of the reasons why I said before that we're living in a very good time.
Okay.
Of course, it could be a better time, but the time that we're living in right now is not bad, not a bad time to be living in, because we're in the middle of that great shift in human consciousness on this planet.
And I think it's also extremely helpful to have people to remind us, like people like you, people from your institution, the Ananda Marga. And I think whoever needs some sense of reinforcement or reassurance, I think people like you and from various other philosophies and schools of thought, I think it's just nice because it's so easy to get lost in today's day and age.
Right. People should keep in mind, no matter what you're going through, keep in mind that your destiny is to attain what you ultimately want deep within yourself. That is your undeniable and unalterable destiny, and nothing is going to change that. It's just a question of time and practice when you will ultimately attain that state of enlightened being that you are ultimately destined to attain. It's only a matter of time and practice. So it depends on yourself saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to start practicing. I'm going to start moving proactively. Of course, we're all moving passively towards that state of being, but if we're suffering at the same time, it's better to do it proactively.
Yeah.
It's better to suffer proactively than it is to suffer passively.
Yeah.
Because you're in that proactive practice, you're using your, say for example, I mentioned before, service to others, helping others is a great part of the yogic lifestyle. It's better to suffer in helping others than to suffer just by sitting at home being hopeless about life. because in helping others, you may be undergoing hardship. You may have to go through different obstacles to help others in different ways. You may be feeding the poor or helping homeless people or whatever. You have to undergo hardship, but at the same time you're helping those people and you're helping yourself.
Yeah.
So that's better than sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself.
I think that's really well said. And I think on that note, I'd like to thank you, Dada Gunamuktananda. Thank you so much, I think, for just being here today with everything you've experienced, with all your knowledge, your wisdom, I think your kindness to share it with me and everyone listening today. So I think on behalf of everyone, I've forgotten how to speak. I think I'm regressing. I'd like to thank you so much, and I really respect and appreciate you for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I also thank you for all the good work that you're doing as well, and having these podcasts, and you're helping to spread the message also for a better world. So thanks for that.
Thank you, and I hope to meet you in India on your next journey here, or wherever we have to meet. I'm sure we'll end up meeting. It might be another Zoom call or maybe in person, but I'm sure we've connected with each other beyond these physical means already.
Absolutely.
Thank you
in
so
any case,
much.
till next time, till we meet next, all the best, and continue with all your good work.
Thank you so much, and all the best with you and with your journey ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. Namaskar.